So I understand that you were born in Moscow, and I wonder what your childhood was like growing up in the 1980s in Moscow.
The most thing is I remember it's just being a child, going to the country house. For some reason, that's where like my best childhood memories are. When I was about 5, my parents decided that I didn't go to nursery or kindergarten. I was always like with my mom or my grandmother, and they said it would be nice for me to spend some time with other children and like, learning to do something else. So they sent me to lessons, just a couple hours per week, but we were doing music, dance, art. I enjoyed those lessons and I enjoyed art in particular. And the teacher, apparently she saw something in me. So she told my parents that she thinks I have a talent. And she even went further and took my portfolio, all those drawings I created with her. And so she took them to an like proper art school to see if they want to enroll me. And apparently they liked it too. So I'm really grateful to that first teacher. I don't remember her name, but that was her who really saw something in me at the age of 5. I have no idea what she did see, but that's how I got into art school. So I was just 6 and it was kind of an evening school, which I would go to 2 or 3 times per week after my normal school. But I started it exactly the same year with my normal school, and then I finished it after 10 years. So for 10 years, every week, except for summer holidays, I was just constantly drawing something, painting, whatever they asked us to do.
Do you enjoy it? Because I would have imagined as a child you would want to go out and play, not work and work and work. But you were doing this for so long, it's from such a young age.
I didn't mind doing it because I think if I didn't like it, I would say something to my parents. But I can't say that I really loved it. As you said, I mean, I would choose playing and doing something fun like any time over drawing. It's only much later towards high school or even like university years when I actually realized that I'm actually enjoying doing art, making art and creating. But before I was kind of really going with the flow.
So when you realized you enjoy art, was that when you started thinking, I want to do it for the rest of my life as a career?
I don't know, funny enough, I kind of didn't put much thought into what I want to be doing. And I was a good girl. I always listened to my parents. They saw that I'm quite good at it. So they suggested, why don't you just continue doing art? But actually, they thought that maybe being an artist is not the best way to earn a living. So their suggestion was I do something like with applied arts. So they chosen a university for me and a course around graphic design and advertisement. At least that's how it was called. I mean, they teach slightly different things. It was just a title, but my parents wanted me to have more real life application to my skills. So not that just I'll be an artist, but I'll be able to work on the computer or work in agencies. So more real life application. And I wasn't against it. As I said, somehow I just was going with the flow. My parents said it would be a good idea. So I said, yeah, sure, why not?
Was this the 5-year course at Moscow Textile University?
Yes, that was the one. At the beginning, we went to see how they do things. And what really spoke to me is the ornamental and decorative way that they were approaching all the subjects. So it wasn't strict academic type of drawing and painting. When you learn the techniques, there are specific ways things supposed to be and look. We were still doing plenty of model drawing and still life, so things has to be like done properly. But at the same time, there was this kind of decorative ornamental flair that would probably come from the textiles, because there are patterns, there are like different color blocking in textiles. So I think that kind of flew into other like painting and drawing areas around the whole textile academy. So it was actually a blessing, because this time at the uni it gave me quite a distinctive, style, you may say, or things that I appreciate. I suppose you can see it in my work. So it's quite decorative because I use different colors. I like patterns. I like incorporate them wherever I can. So I'm glad I didn't go to like really academic school.
I mean, it certainly sounds like a blessing because you have said before that those 5 years were crucial in setting you on the path that you are now. And I wonder what it was that was so pivotal.
All this kind of revelations I only like realized much later, because during those 5 years my main worry was that I'm not learning anything about graphic design, because it was still 90s. The university wanted to be modern and contemporary. They wanted to attract more students. So the title of the courses were right, but they didn't know how to teach us the real life graphic design or what it actually means. For the 5 years, I was frustrated that I'm kind of wasting my time. But in fact, right now, I know that it's not true. And one of the key things I learned during those years was because of the art summer practices that the student was sent to. And that's where we learned to see the world with artists' eyes. It means that, for instance, when you walking around, you just try to see all the objects, all the details as they are, trying to visualize how would you draw, how would you depict them. We practiced finding beauty and observing the details in like the weirdest things, like crooked houses, dilapidated buildings, half-eaten leaves. That's taught us that the less perfect the object or the motif is, the more unique it is, the more interesting and special. Everything we noticed, we were supposed to kind of draw. Doesn't matter which technique you used, we were giving freedom, but we had to create a large number of sketches, artworks, just depicting whatever catches our eyes. And being given this task, you really start to look around and really truly see things. You become an observer. So you don't just go around being inside your head. The mind goes away and you just learn to look and see.
So you learned those very crucial techniques in those 5 years. What led you to decide you wanted to study graphic communication at the University of Hertfordshire?
Well, that's because I was really frustrated that I haven't learned anything practical. So then my parents and I, we thought, I can't learn it in Moscow, then maybe I should go and study one more year somewhere abroad. And we picked England. So that's how I ended up going to Hertfordshire University.
And was that where you picked up your love of lettering?
Yes, I think that's the first year, maybe then I did masters as well. So during those 2 years of my UK studies, I think that's when first of all, I realized that graphic design, it's not all about typography, but typography is a crucial part of it. So I think, yeah, that's when I really got interested in letter forms, arranging them, creating interesting compositions with letters, trying to draw them, imagining that they're not just letters, but they can be illustrations, so they need to be coherent with the message.
The first love that you have, which is, using paper as an art medium. And was it something you were experimenting with as a personal hobby while you were studying as well?
I wouldn't say so. During my 2 years in England, I was mainly doing things on the computer, because finally coming to the UK, I kind of felt the creativity in the air. I could feel that there are opportunities, and I wanted to actually enter different competitions. They were usually design competitions. So I was still kind of doing a lot of things on the computer and not using paper that much. It's only towards the end of my master's degree, I entered one competition where they asked us to draw some things. And while doing some work for this competition, I suddenly realized that I prefer doing things with my hands rather than on the computer. So after I finished my master's, after I graduated, I spent like more than a year actually producing hand-drawn illustrations with very fine pen. I would created, very fine line illustrations. Some of them were with colors. So basically I was looking for my style, but using drawings. I still try to incorporate typography quite a bit, but not with paper. Paper was not in the picture. Paper was always in my life in some ways, but it was, I think, mainly during my Moscow years, because back then there was a period I was interested in origami. There was another period I tried making handcrafted papers. I liked different textures. I would collect some nice textures if I ever stumbled upon one. But there was nothing like continuous or really specific that I was doing with it. I just liked it, but didn't use it that much.
So what was the turning point where paper really came into your life?
When I was still doing my hand-drawn typographic illustrations, I've done quite a few of them, and I decided it's time for me to send them over to magazine editors or some advertising agencies just to get some potential jobs. And I decided the best way would be to put together a small, like a booklet with my work samples. And what I was missing is the eye-catching illustration for the cover. And I decided that I'd like to create my name. So I tried several hand-drawn versions, but I didn't really like them. They were not original enough, because I needed my booklet to be noticed and picked up. So as you know, the cover has to be spectacular. I don't remember how this idea came to my mind, but all I remember, I had some paper, I started to cut it into strips and then just play with those strips. Eventually I made an outline on the mount board just with a pencil. And then I took the strips of paper and repeated those drawn outlines with the edge glued strips, also like rolling them, filling the insides of the letters. I made some of the paper strips like come out of those letters, just basically had fun. It took me a couple hours, but once I finished, I was really surprised. Wow, it looks so good. I kind of felt I'm at home. I really want to do it further. I dropped the booklet idea because I got so much interested in this new technique. So I decided I want to practice more. I want to try different things. So I spent another half a year just practicing, working with paper, using color, still using like just white paper. In the beginning, I tried to blend my hand drawings with paper.
I think you said that at the time you didn't think that paper was enough, right? You needed to draw with the paper.
Yeah, it gives some nice 3D effects, but I couldn't let go of my hand-drawn style. So it took quite a few artworks for all the drawing part to be squeezed off the designs.
You said that there was a half year where you were just exploring. How were you exploring that? What kind of projects were you looking for to expand on your skills?
I was still focusing on typography mostly. So, for instance, my name, the very first one, Yulia, I've created using like red out paper for the outlines and then white for the insides. But then I thought, how would things look like if I use just white paper? So the next creation was made with white paper only. So next I thought, okay, I can see how the white thing look like. But what if I use like everything in color? So that was like my next step. It was still all around letters. So gradually, like I create one thing, then I get an idea of what would it be if I change like this particular aspect of it. And so I just moved on from one artwork to another, like pushing it in different directions until I thought that until I kind of felt that I've done enough experience with the paper so that I'm ready to show it to people and see where it takes me.
So during that half year when you were exploring, were you also being an illustrator as well? Because you had to fund yourself, right?
Yeah. Well, I was married already, so big thanks to my husband who supported me. But at the same time, I was also doing some translation projects for the company my husband was working for. So I brought some income, but I'm grateful to my family. So they always allowed me the opportunity to pursue what I really want to be doing, because it was my decision that I want to do at least something with those like translation tasks. I wanted to contribute, but overall they told me just go ahead and do what you feel doing. So in that way, I was really blessed.
That's amazing to hear. So you said after that you were ready to show your work. How do you go about getting your first client?
I found several magazines, the ones that I liked the most. I found who the art directors were, somehow found their emails. I'm good at doing research, and I just sent, I think, no more than 10 emails like to my favorite magazine. And yeah, one of them replied, and it happened to be the art director of the Guardian supplement called G2. And he said if I wanted to illustrate their upcoming Christmas issue about, I think it was called Thrifty Christmas. I believe they already had some kind of design for it, but maybe it wasn't that excited. So he kind of decided to take a chance and give me this assignment to see if I managed to create something better to replace whatever they already had ready. But the thing is, there was only less than a week basically available for me to give it a try if I choose to. Obviously, it was my first opportunity, so I said yes, even though I knew I'm jumping into a water without swimming vest. But the main issue was I didn't know how much time things would take me. I was only doing it in my own time without any deadlines. With my first commercial project, I had very particular time frame which needed to be met. So that was the challenging part. I really had to learn how to manage my time.
And wasn't that the first time you learned that what you were doing was called quilling? You didn't know what it was before?
I found out about it later. So I've done this first project. It was crazy. I almost had a panic attack at some point because I was just realizing I'm not gluing fast enough. But once I still managed to finish the job, they sent a photographer. So another crucial part that together with that photographer, we found a way to photograph this type of artwork, which has to be really specific. So that's another thing I learned on the way. But once this supplement was published, it started to appear on various design blogs just because it was something new. I mean, this haven't been seen much before. And so I started to get emails or comments from people, and some of them would mention quilling. And I decided to Google what it is. And that's how I found out that what I was doing had actually a name.
Quilling is actually quite an ancient technique, right? Back in the 16th century. What is it actually?
Yeah, it's believed to be ancient. No one can really pinpoint when it arrived because, when paper has become available, it would be just natural for people to take strips and start playing with them, coiling with them. So the earliest preserved samples of this kind of paper filigree are dated from around 17th century, maybe even earlier, but most likely they existed before. It is paper, so not many of those ancient things have survived. I think it really was put on the map during the Renaissance period when monks and nuns used it instead of metal wire to embellish and decorate different religious objects or book covers, because usually they would create this paper filigree and then gild the edges. So it kind of gave the books and the items this shiny, expensive look, but not as expensive as if they would use metal filigrees.
So discovering all this, did it change the way that you were doing your own art? Because at the time, I think you were using cocktail straw, wooden toothpick, and thick paper rather than thin paper, which they always use.
I've discovered the term quilling, but I kind of stuck to my guns. I still use exactly the same tools and cocktail sticks. I haven't really switched to all other techniques. The key difference is that I use heavy paper. That's why I don't really need those tools and those basic shapes that traditional quilling uses. I just create my designs and lines freehand. When paper is thick, when it's cut into strip, you just shape it, dip into glue, put it on the surface, and it stands on its own. With traditional quilling, it uses very, very thin, flimsy paper, so it's not stable. The only way you can work with it if you roll it into some kind of a shape, like a spiral or some kind of a loop. There are so many different shapes. I don't know them well because I never really learned how to do it like the traditional way.
So it was very much your own personal style. No one else was doing the same thing.
Yes, I kind of reinvented it from scratch using slightly different methods.
Did you start seeing people copy your style, and did you feel as though this is my style and I'm very protective of it? Why are you copying me?
Yeah, in the beginning, I really felt protective of it. It didn't happen overnight. I had, I think, around 2 years of when it was pretty much just me doing it. But then at some point, more and more other people started to use it. So I would somehow stumble upon some magazine ad or other illustration created in a similar way. So I did feel they've stolen my style, and it was unpleasant. But luckily, over the years, I kind of grew out of those feelings, realizing that it's actually a good thing. If people are following my example, it means I'm onto something good. So right now, I only see it in a positive way, and I try to kind of teach people and help exploration of paper. What I'm really trying to encourage is creative freedom within the material, because it's so new. I'm doing my own work, trying to push it into new undiscovered direction, but there can also be other people pushing it in a different way that I would never think of. So I think by doing these experiments and work together, we push the whole medium further. Because I do believe this type of the paper art can stand alongside other mediums such as painting. It's amazing in its own right, but it's still not known in the same way and not celebrated. I think my work is to show people the potential of this technique and what you can do with paper. And now I'm excited to see other people joining me.
And what is the process of creating one of your paper artwork? Because some of it, like your name, took a couple hours, some of it takes like 2 months. So that's very, very long. So how does the whole process work?
Well, it does depend on what you're trying to create. I mean, in the beginning of my career, I was still mainly doing typography-based illustrations. So that kind of design would require one approach, because you already have those letter forms. So I would use the existing letter forms, but just bring over some decorative elements into it. The key thing for those type of designs was to be precise with the lines. If one line is crooked or slightly off, it was really noticeable, because there are kind of letters. Things has to be parallel, proportionally corrected, things need to be in the right place. So my first years was kind of a obsession about ensuring I designed neatly, so glue doesn't smudge, it's not smudges everywhere. And I was learning how to work with colors, because another crucial thing was every strip of paper drops a shadow, and when you use different colored papers next to each other, then those shadows, the reflections, they blend. So if you have, red paper next to yellow paper, so the overall reflection between them will be some kind of orange, and you can vary that reflection by varying the distance between those strips of paper. So I was kind of learning how I consciously can adjust those parameters to create the effects that I need. So nothing is random.
Are those reflections the reason why you favorite using white background a lot?
Yeah, that's because there is no interference between the colors. Anytime you introduce some color on the background, you will get this color added to any reflection from the strips of paper that you have on top. So for instance, it comes to the point when you use very bright background, it simply overwhelms whatever reflection you might have on top. For this neat and organized and precise type of design, I would always use white paper surface on the background.
And what about when you use dark backgrounds, which you use sometimes? I imagine you must have to change your style as well to adapt to having a dark background.
Well, I think right now we're still talking about like my early days style. So back then I maybe only used dark background a couple of times. And what I had to do is to introduce quite a few areas of solid colored paper on the background, like something light areas, because it's just impossible to create eye-catching and bold elements or lines when you glue the edge glue a strip of paper on a dark background. it just doesn't hold. It's too thin to be impactful in any way. So that's why I didn't really use it that much. Later, when I discovered my next method of working with paper strips, then I started to use dark background more and more. But the idea is the same. Whenever it is dark, I have to find ways, either by introducing other paper manipulation methods or just finding some ways to make the lines thicker in order to stand out from the darkness.